Hello, this is Moise Jacobs for DeBarra's spoken word. It's the 3rd of March 2023, and I'm here with Anton Floyd, all the way in. Where are you, Anton, at the moment?
In Shigila.
Okay.
And outside,
sorry?
Just outside in Shigila.
Okay. And you are going to be with us on the 14th of March 2023 from 8:30 onwards with a program based on your collection Depositions, which was published last year.
That's right, in June last year.
Yeah. And can you tell a little more about who you expect to bring to the event?
In terms of performance during the night?
Yeah.
The nature of it. Well, the book is quite long, and it deals with the refugee crisis. And the central portion of the book, which consists of 122 tercets of 3-line poems, have been translated into 20 languages, or selections of 20 languages. And in the past, where we have done readings, I've invited people to come and just to give a flavor of those languages at the readings. So in the past, we've had people read in Arabic, in Farsi, in Irish, in Ukrainian, and it has been a marvelous way of communicating the sense that this is a humanitarian project that sees the world as one, and the book is designed in a way to help me understand what human empathy is. And so far, it has resonated with readers, and I've been very moved by the responses that people have had to the poems.
Can you give an example of responses?
I can give you an example. When the book was launched in June in Dublin, unbeknownst to me, that there were 2 women who had recently arrived from Kabul, and they were in the audience. And I'd invited some people to come and read in Irish and Lingala and French and Greek. And when that part of, snippets, 3 or 4 of these tercet poems. And when that had finished, this very striking Afghani lady stood up and said, "Can I read some of these poems?" And I said, "By all means, do come." And she stood up and she said, "I'm a lawyer. I've been working in Afghanistan for many, many years. Because the Taliban have taken over, I no longer can live safely in the country, and I've come back to Ireland." And she's very grateful to be in Ireland. She says, "But I've lost everything. And I lost my language to explain what I'd lost until I read these poems." And then she proceeded to read a number of the poems in Farsi. And we were all very, very moved. We could see how it resonated with her. And then later she wrote to confirm the experience that she had with the book. So I was deeply moved by that. But I keep getting notes. It's the first time that I've had lots and lots of responses from people in writing to the nature of the book. And even just the other day, when I was launching the book in Cyprus, where I grew up, a woman wrote to me. Her name is Marina, and she said, "I keep picking up Depositions. I read a few poems, I have a little cry, I feel a lot better, and then go on." So, and these things are a validation of the fact that we have a common humanity. I think it was Auden who said, "We all have different faces, but we all have the same heart."
Yeah, I have no doubt that is true, except it seems not everyone seems to want to go there, maybe.
I mean, it's not an easy read. It is a cathartic read. It was a cathartic process of writing for me, and I'm glad that it's having this this resonance with people and, around the world, really.
And can you say? I mean, I know from what you've written in here and what you've thought previously that it resonates very much with your own experience as well. Because as a young man, as a child, how old were you when you went through a civil war in Cyprus and had to flee?
I was an infant, and it was in my my infant years that we were in Cyprus. During the War of Independence. I have two brothers who are much older than I am, and because of my very complicated family background, they ended up having to do military service in the British Army. And they ended up in Cyprus as young men, and both of them were wounded during that crisis. The British euphemistically call it the emergency, but my older brother was very seriously wounded, and my younger brother, who was an athlete, was a victim of a hit and run accident. He was standing at the side of the road in uniform, and they smashed his leg up, and he's never really run since.
Oh.
But given that which happened to our family in the mid to late 50s, my parents never uttered a single anti-Cypriot sentiment at all. And in fact, we were fully integrated. My first languages were Greek and French, and then English.
But because I know that your family is a mixture of different nationalities. So how would you describe your parents? What was their?
My mother's French-Lebanese, and my father was half Irish, half Maltese.
Okay, wow.
And we were all born in Egypt, I mean, my parents were displaced from the Lebanon, from Egypt, but my great-grandfather was displaced from the Lebanon. Family ended up in Palestine. They were forced out when the British Mandate ran out in 1948. And the family has been really dispersed all over the world. There's hardly a continent that you can go and you won't find some of our DNA, deeply rooted in that.
Can you say something about how this background, how that can you still feel it in your bones, in your memory, in your reactions, your emotions?
Oh yeah, I haven't lost touch with all my friends that from my childhood, to such an extent that after I came to school, I was sent to school in Ireland, and I graduated. I met Carol Ann, my wife. We had Aegon as a little boy. We were on our way to Japan, and I said to Carol Ann, look, I grew up in Cyprus. I know Ireland very well. I know where you grew up. I know your family. I know your friends. But let me show you my Cyprus. So we arranged for friends gave us a flat and a place to stay, and we arrived in 1980 at Easter. And the following morning, we went for a walk. Springtime in Cyprus is unparalleled for its flora and fauna and its bird life. She fell in love with the fragrances and the air, and she said, I could live here. I didn't need much of a hint. And as soon as the Easter festivities were over, we both got teaching jobs in Nicosia. So the short visit ended up, nearly 15 years.
Wow.
And three babies more.
So they're all born in Cyprus?
3 of them were born in Cyprus. One in Nicosia, one in Limassol, and one in Paphos. That plots my my little career on the island in education as an English teacher and head of English and drama, and then as a school principal.
And the tercets that you wrote, how did the ideas, the inspiration come to you? Can you say something about that process?
It was, I mean, I don't want to get too far into my own personal traumas, but we stayed in Cyprus after independence, and the troubles never really went away. And we got caught up in intercommunal strife in 1963, and there were terrible atrocities committed in our neighborhood. We lived in northern Nicosia, and at Christmas 1963, we were forcibly evicted, forced out of our house at gunpoint. Our house was commandeered by Turkish militiamen because there were atrocities perpetrated on Turkish Cypriots in that particular neighborhood of Nicosia. People were very much on edge, and we went to the south and we found rooms in a hotel, and my mother said, look, we have to go back to the neighborhood and we have to pick up our neighbors, our Greek Cypriot and our Armenian neighbors in the area who had all been in our basement. Even Turkish Cypriots had been in our basement during this fighting. And in fact, there were bullet holes in the house. Windows in our house had been smashed, things of that nature. And so we went back. As my mother took me, as she said they wouldn't hurt a woman and a boy. So she put Red Cross stickers on the car and went back and made 3 trips. And during the course of that trip, we were stopped, and my mother was knifed in the neck by people who were on edge, things of that nature. And that house was a very happy house for me. And that whole neighborhood is redolent with lots and lots of personal memories. And so that never left me.
And if you say that, what are you talking about?
Both the experience and the place.
But the experience must have been gruesome to go back there.
It was something I needed to do. And the island was divided. It still is divided. By the time we'd gone back in 1980, the island had been invaded by the Turks. I had lost a number of my Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot friends during the 1974 war, the invasion of Turkey. And that experience was very fresh in people's minds. And consequently, people were talking about loss and displacement. If you can imagine a population of 1 million people on the island, just short of 1 million people, and about 250,000 of them were displaced from the north, Greek Cypriots, into the south, and about 20,000 Turkish Cypriots in the south moved to the north. It becomes very crowded all of a sudden, and everybody knows everyone who has suffered or the loss of property. And I have friends who lost their homes. We lost ours. People who have lost their homes and have never had any reparation. A very dear school friend of mine has written a book called The Traitors Club. She's a Greek Cypriot journalist, and she meets with Turkish Cypriots in a wonderful old Ottoman caravanserai in northern Nicosia, and they talk about getting to know each other again.
Wow, that's amazing. What's a caravanserai?
Caravanserai was like a place where merchants would bring their camels and they would stay. It's like a motel, a camel motel. And people also, they'd have rooms, there'd be places for their animals, and also to sell their wares.
And is it possible for them to speak former enemies, so to speak, or former on opposing lines without resentment or an animosity, or do they?
Well, you've got extremists on both sides, but there are also a moderate middle, and the moderate middle are lovely, lovely people, and there's a movement of, you know, for reconciliation, but it is thorny. You know, if you've lost your property, there's huge amounts of money and compensation that needs to be, made, arrangements about property, about business, life in general. And if you have two communities that have had very little contact with each other, they don't understand each other's cultures. They don't understand, they're no longer bilingual. There's a job of work to be done in order to get people to understand each other.
Is the conflict still in place? Because it's a conflict between
Turkey
and Greece.
Ceasefire. It's a ceasefire. There's no solution to the problem. I mean, it's very complicated politically.
And at the same time, is it likely to flare up again, or do you think it will be a stalemate?
It flares up. There are times during the year where things do flare up, and there are occasional incidents, and there are difficulties. I mean, I was invited by the Irish ambassador and an arts foundation to go and launch the book in Nicosia, because you asked the question, what inspired it? Well, you hear the stories about people, what they've lost, and the feelings that they have, and it percolates. I mean, it's taken nearly 20 years for it to find language for it, or a vehicle for it. And the book, in that sense, there are little fragmentations or snippets of conversations. But I'll give you one particular instance. When we moved from Nicosia to Limassol, we went up into an area which had been a former Turkish, and it's an abandoned Turkish village. And after 1974, Callaghan came to Cyprus, and he organized the swapping of population. So Turks in the south went north, and the Greeks from the north came south. And this village, Plataniskia, which is a Greek word which means in the shade of the plane tree, up in the mountains, view of the Mediterranean, citrus and olive groves and carob tree. I mean, it's beautiful, snake-ridden area, but very, very beautiful. And we went into this little traditional village house, and there were handprints in the cement of a little girl called Aisha. And she must have been about 5, and they put the concrete in the floor in the one main room of the house, and so her name was there and the date, you see, and 1972. So she was 5 years of age. It so happened that we went north to Kyrenia, where basically I grew up, and with the Turkish Cypriot friend Mustafa Salman, who did some of the translations into Turkish in the book. He said, there's some people here from Plataniskia, and they run a coffee shop here in Kyrenia, which is the most beautiful Crusader castle presiding over a lovely little harbor, which was my playground as a teenager. And we went to the coffee shop, and I met this Turkish man, and we happened to be in his house. And he showed me photographs of Aisha and so on. And there was such a longing for him to go back, but he couldn't because of the political divide.
Okay, so that isn't allowed.
Things have relaxed a little bit now, and Turkish Cypriots are beginning to buy property in the south, but there isn't a political solution.
So in that sense, it doesn't. Do you see any similarities with Northern Ireland or any of?
There are very interesting parallels between Northern Ireland and Cyprus. Too complicated to go into, but yes, there are areas of where you wouldn't feel safe.
Yeah, still it seems to moved in a positive direction up there. Okay, what can we who are you bringing on the 14th of March to read?
Okay, well, there's myself, and
oh yes.
what I try to do is I try to contextualize the poems as much as possible, go into a little bit more detail about the kind of things that we're discussing, and I will read from the poems. I've asked Malcolm and Elaine Urquhart, who are the Lost Gecko, and they have some songs that are perfectly suited to the theme, and they have also learnt the two songs that are in the book, and they'll perform on the night musically. A very close friend of ours from Iran is a very courageous choreographer, and she has made dance films, and I just wanted to show a little bit about her courage, and we'll show that. And I'll probably screen my own poetry film, which is for the women of Iran, Women, Life of Freedom, just to give that flavor. And I will read, and I've asked some people to come. I'm waiting for confirmation. Some of the people who translated the poems into the African languages and into Arabic, to see if they're able to come on a Tuesday night to Clonakilty. If not, I'm not averse to finding people locally who can read in those languages. I discovered that next door to to DeBarra's, there's a little restaurant called the Dose, and the people who run it are from Egypt.
Oh, really?
So,
they could read as well.
We might be able to get them, but there are people in Cork who will, I'm sure, come and read in Arabic but if there's anybody in Clonakilty who can read in Lingala or Kikongo or Swahili, and we have Ukrainians, of course, here in the village, and I might ask them to come and read. What delights me is that there's Russian and Ukrainian on the same page.
Okay.
To give that sense, the flavor of the, poetry does transcend.
Yes, it does.
Politics gets in the way. Yes, that's the one.
That's the book. And the cover is made by your son?
Caroline, my wife. Yeah. And I want to say also that the book is all the proceeds from the sale of the book go to the refugee funds of the UNHCR. And I'm rather pleased about that. It's also on their list of recommended reading. And interestingly, the book has found not just favor amongst poets and literary people, but it seems to cross into just ordinary readers of all ages and backgrounds. I've done readings for active retirement group. I've done school visits, intimate readings, poetry reading, and it's just wonderful to see people respond in a positive way to it.
Well, it's a very moving book. It's very there, and for some reason it's quite interesting as well to have a look at the different languages, to see it laid out in that way. You can slowly go through it.
I mean, originally I just wanted it to be in English and Irish. Okay. And in Irish particularly, because where we live here in our particular area, our parish, townland of Carrigdangan, 9 out of 10 families perished during the famine.
Mm.
And the back of our house, there used to be a laneway up to a little village, a clochon, a settlement of 5 houses. But according to Griffith's evaluations, there were 70 souls living in the village. And that village is rubbed out. Although the field arrangements, the stone walls are there, but the clay cabins and sod roofs, have gone. And they all perished. And the only way out of the village was down past our the back of our house. And it's very hard not to think about the famine experience. West Cork was very badly felt. And a lot of them, the displacement of people is not just in war, but there's economic migrants. And they've every justification for leaving, because the messes that we have in sub-Saharan Africa are very often the result of European meddling and exploitation. So we owe them in a way, and that kind of reparation needs to be made. And there is famine and difficulties, and part of the problem is that we loan these countries money from the West, and their loans, and the interest has to be paid. And in order to pay that interest back, they plant cash crops. They're not subsistence. And so famine becomes a very easy outcome of that kind of management.
It's like a new form of colonialism, isn't it?
It is. It's that. And my son is married to an Eritrean, and his parents-in-law, my brother and sister-in-law, were in a refugee camp in Sudan for 14 years where they met. And Haile, who was involved in the revolutionary war that was happening in Eritrea, has 2 bullets still in his back. And so it's very close to home for us. And here in the house, they're part of the family now. We gave succor to 2 Congolese boys, and so all these particular kinds of stories have fed into what I hope is an authentic voice of people who suffered. And remember also, during the time that we were in Cyprus, during the 80s, there was a war in the Lebanon. And so you have that layer of, people would come to Cyprus from the Lebanon. And I was horrified to discover in Cyprus last October that there are now Lebanese boat people.
Really?
Because Lebanon has become a failed state, again, through international meddling, and the country it's an ordeal, really. And Cyprus has also been an asylum for Armenians, and the Armenians, they have a race memory of genocide under the Ottomans. So all these stories filter in, and they've become part of my story. And I can swear perfectly well in Armenian and in Turkish and in Greek.
I think that would be really helpful. Okay, thank you very much, Anton. And I look forward to Depositions on.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you
for writing this.